Hello, students. Today we're going to dive into a really important chapter from your civics textbook, Outcomes of Democracy. We'll try to understand what we should expect from a democratic government. Specifically, we'll look at three key words: accountable, responsive, and legitimate.
So, we all know how important it is to vote. We elect our leaders, and they form the government. But I want you to think about something for a moment. Is our job as citizens done the moment we cast our vote?
Well, actually, that's just the beginning. You see, the real test of any democracy starts the day after the elections are over. It's all about what happens in those years between the voting days, what the government does, and, more importantly, what we as citizens can do.
All right, so to understand this properly, here's our plan for today. First, we'll look at why democracy is about so much more than just voting. Then we will define what an accountable and responsive government is. We'll also tackle that common question about efficiency. After that, we'll explore transparency and citizen control. Then we'll look at democracy's biggest strength, which is legitimacy. And finally, we will talk about the reality versus the ideal.
Okay, let's begin with our first section, democracy beyond just voting.
You know, the most basic thing, the most fundamental outcome we expect from democracy is a government that is accountable to its citizens, a government that is controlled by its citizens. It's a system where we, the people, are supposed to be in charge.
And this brings us to two very, very important words. You must know these for your exams. The idea of an accountable and responsible government. Let's break down what these really mean.
First, let's talk about accountability. What does it mean? In simple words, it means a government is answerable to its citizens. For every decision it makes, for every action it takes, it has to explain why. It is responsible for what it does.
So how does this happen in real life? Well, the most powerful tool is regular, free, and fair elections. If a government doesn't do its job, we can vote it out. That's the biggest accountability. Then you have open public debates on big policies, which you see on TV and in newspapers. And, even on a smaller level, you hold the government accountable when you ask your local representative questions about their work.
All right, the second word is responsiveness. A responsive government is one that responds to the needs and expectations of the people. It has to listen to what the public wants. For example, if the people in an area are demanding a new hospital, a responsive government will pay attention and try to act on that demand.
Now, this leads to a common complaint that you must have heard. People often say that democracies are very slow, that they're inefficient. So let's look at this important question of efficiency.
Let's compare the two. On one hand, you have a non-democratic government, like a dictatorship. A decision can be made very fast. But the problem is, the people may not agree with it, and this can cause trouble later. On the other hand, in a democracy, decisions are slower. And why is that? Because there are discussions, debates, and negotiations. Many different views have to be considered. The big advantage here is that the final decision is more likely to be accepted by the people, and therefore it is more effective.
And this brings us to a key line from your textbook. The cost of time that democracy pays is perhaps worth it. This just means that yes, democracy takes time, but that time is a price worth paying for decisions that are better and more stable in the long run.
Okay, let's move on to our fourth point, which is all about transparency and citizen control.
So what do we mean by transparency? Think of it like this. The government should be working in the open, not in secret. As citizens, we have the right to see and examine the process of decision-making. This right is very important because it helps to stop the misuse of power.
So what tools do we have to ensure this control? Well, we already talked about elections and public debate, but another very powerful tool is the right to information, or RTI. I'm sure you have heard of it. This law allows any citizen to ask the government for information. For example, you could file an RTI to find out how much money was spent on building a new road in your area. And of course, an independent judiciary and a free media also play a very important role in keeping the government in check.
Now we come to what is possibly the single greatest strength of a democracy, and that is legitimacy.
So what exactly does legitimate mean? A legitimate government is one that people accept as their own government. And why do they accept it? It's simple, because they have chosen it themselves through elections. So even if the government is slow or not very efficient, it is still seen as the people's own government. And this acceptance is its greatest strength.
And we have real evidence to support this idea. Just look at this data from South Asia. In India, a huge 95% of people support being ruled by leaders they elected. In Bangladesh, it's 96%. This tells us something very important. Even with all its problems, people have a deep belief in a government that they have chosen for themselves.
Okay, for our final section, let's be honest and practical. Let's look at the reality of how democracies perform versus the ideal we hope for.
We have to admit, the actual record of democracies is not perfect. They can be very slow to respond to what people need, they can be inefficient, and yes, they are not free from corruption. These are real challenges that we cannot ignore.
But, and this is a very big but, we must compare democracy with the alternatives. The evidence shows that non-democratic governments are often even more corrupt, and they are far less sensitive to the people. And here's the key difference. In a democracy, we have the power to protest, and we have the power to vote out a corrupt government. That's a power people in other systems simply don't have.
So, to sum up the main takeaway from this lesson, legitimacy, the fact that the government is chosen by the people, is democracy's unique superpower. Accountability and responsiveness, however, are not guaranteed. They are goals that we as citizens must constantly demand and fight for.
And this leads me to a final thought for you. The examination of democracy never stops, and we, the citizens, are the examiners. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. If you were to grade our democracy today on accountability, responsiveness, and legitimacy, what grade would you give it?